Okay, so this is a map of the breakdown in Massachusetts. The blue is Hillary, and the green is Sanders. So as you can see, it seems like Sanders won the urban areas, um, you know, where there are farmers and, large estates, big property owners. And it seems like Clinton won the downtown urban cores where there's lots of, people working, subsistence jobs, minimum wage labor, renting property, that kind of thing. Is that really a coherent narrative to you? Is that, Sanders should win where there's more money and Clinton should win where there's less money? Does that really make sense? So they've counted all the votes in Massachusetts now, and she managed to win by one delegate. The proper scorecard is Hillary 6, Bernie 4, and one tie. But it's the delegate count that matters, and he kept her under 600 pledged delegates. The superdelegate talk is, it's establishment scaremongering. The reality is that they're free to change their vote at any time and would be committing suicide if they voted against the primary process. If Bernie did manage to win, the the pledged delegates and the super delegates showed up and they said no, we're going to vote for. You might as well just give the election to the Republicans, right? So she's less than 200 ahead, and he can catch her on that if he can beat her in Pennsylvania and Washington and ... by the same margins that he beat her in Minnesota and Colorado, and if he can split or win Michigan and Florida, and he can do this. Okay, the Democratic nominee should not be determined by the Bible Belt, and you can't blame liberals for bailing if it is. But the race is pivoting this week. Okay, clearly. There are less red states coming up. Logic and abstraction needs to yield to concrete results. It's just better than the media would like you to believe, that's all I'm saying. I'm more interested right now in trying to understand the map. Okay, maybe it's evidence that Canadians should be taken skeptically in trying to understand, American elections, and I've warned you repeatedly. But I think it's a little more sinister. Okay, this map makes absolutely no sense. Clinton's ability to disproportionately swing blacks makes no sense. And when things consistently fail to make sense, it's reasonable to question their legitimacy. I don't claim to have an understanding of data on the urban-rural split in America, and the fact that the parties have been so interchangeable for so long throws some wrenches into everything. But in Canada, this map would be equivalent to suggesting that the NDP swept the rural farming communities and suburbs, while the Liberals swept the downtown cores, which had a certain level of vocal coherence 100 years ago, but it's impossible to understand today. The wealthier people living, outside. The wealthier people live outside the urban cores. They own property. They have good jobs. They're less interested in socialism. The less wealthy people live inside the urban cores. They work minimum wage jobs. They rent. They're more interested in socialism. So how does Sanders sweep the rural areas and Clinton sweep the urban areas? It's the same incoherent proposal as Clinton sweeping urban Southern blacks. But at least you can jump through some hoops on that, right? I don't see any hoops to jump through on Hillary sweeping Boston and Sanders sweeping the countryside. I'm only able to come up with two explanations, and they both reduce to an unfair election. Okay, the first is that turnout is remarkably low. Now, why this is maybe complex. You've got apathy, or maybe voter suppression techniques. You don't think the Democrats are above that, do you? Or second is that it's just rigged from the start. Okay, no, I can't prove anything. Okay, apathy is the least complex hypothesis, but I'm not entirely convinced it's the right one. We'll have to see as time goes on if any of this starts to make any sense or not. Okay, but I can't explain my inability to make sense of that map in purely cultural terms. It's a class analysis, and that ought not be corrupted by inconsistencies in, Canadian culture versus American culture. A class analysis is a class analysis is a class analysis, and the fact that I'm from Canada and that's in the United States shouldn't really make that big of a difference. The class analysis should still manage to break down properly. And so the map is simply impossible to understand as an accurate reflection of popular will. And it's not just that Sanders lost in Boston. Okay, it's that he won outside Boston too. It's completely the opposite of what anybody ought to expect. Okay, so this is a map of the Republican part of Massachusetts. And we can see the red here is Trump and the blue is Kasich. All right, so this is important because it actually allows us to see where it is that the Boston upper crust is. And everybody knows there's a Boston upper crust, but everybody also knows that there's a famous Boston working class, right? So you would expect the more educated people to not vote for Trump, but to vote for Kasich, right? That makes sense. I know that Massachusetts has swung Republican more than a few times in the last 100 years, right? So that's not. I mean, there's an elite of Republican liberals, right? Or liberal Republicans in Massachusetts. That's not surprising to anybody, and that's where they are, right? But you should, if you were to superimpose that to here, you would expect the Hillary support to be in roughly the same places as the Kasich support, because that's where the upper class is. But you would expect all of those areas around downtown Boston that are red there to be green, and they're not. Okay, and that's the part I can't make sense of. See, it also makes sense to me to think that you see that broad swath of area there that's red. The rural Massachusetts. You would expect the rural Massachusetts to vote for the less socialist candidate as well, right? Because they're rural people. They're farmers. They don't, they're skeptical of godless socialists, right? So I mean, like I say, I just can't really make sense of this much. But just to superimpose it, I mean, you would expect there would be an area in Boston where Clinton would do well, and it's there. That seems to be a lot bigger, and like I say, broadly inverted from what any reasonable class analysis would suggest. The only other answer here, and I'm sorry, but it is that lower class Americans across racial and geographic divides are simply so unaware of what their class interests actually are that they're unable to make a decision that is in their proper self-interest. And that throws the whole basis of democracy out the window. It reduces the entire thing to a pointless charade. My cable modem is not responding. Certainly not the first time I've been in this mess. But it seems to happen whenever I say things that might upset people, as I certainly may have over the last couple of hours. I've bottlenecked myself up so much that I'm not even sure what else I could be doing right now. I know I'm a little behind on the editing. That's something I had to do anyways, so I might take a jump on that. But we'll see how long that's out for. The other possibility is that there's a bit of a snowstorm, but it seems to have gone out suspiciously close to midnight. I paid my bill. I'm certain of that, so we'll see how the rest of the night goes. I think that generally in the worst case scenarios, it's back up by the time the sun comes up usually. I'm not sure really what the point of keeping me offline like that is. They must know that I'm eventually going to find a way back on, so I don't know. We'll find out. Right now I'm going to do some editing. Actually, it seems to have come up as soon as I close my browser. Strange. There's no wireless in here. Anyways, I'm gonna get back to what I was doing. This has been driving me nuts for like 3 hours now. I have 3 comments on this last week tonight with John Oliver video, or let me rephrase that. I'm involved in 3 comment threads. These comment threads have hundreds of responses on them. You would think they would come up at the top of the comments, but that's not what YouTube's algorithm wants to prioritize. It seems like YouTube's algorithm wants to prioritize comments that have less numbers of of responses, and perhaps comments that are made by people with more subscribers. It is literally the case that the top comment on this video, if I use their top comments algorithm, is "this is dumb." It has no responses. I don't know who this individual is, but he appears to have more subscribers than anybody else, and that's the top comment. "This is dumb." Meanwhile, there are at least 3 threads that I'm aware of detailed conversation, but they're so far back that it's taking me a long time to scroll back to them. Because of the issue with the forced updates on the browser, I cannot access them from outside the virtual machine, and I cannot update because I don't want to lose my history. Although I'm considering perhaps maybe copying my history off and upgrading, and then coming back to it. But it keeps freezing within the virtual machine. It seems to be a RAM issue. I've tried blocking hundreds of people that are at the front of the comment thread, but that doesn't seem to be helping either, because the way that the algorithm for the comments works is that it loads all of them and it just hides them. So by blocking people, I'm not actually reducing the amount of stuff in memory, I'm just reducing the amount of stuff on the screen. So this seems to have frozen yet again. It seems like for right now I'm going to have to put it aside. It's really amazing. It's a system. Well, I'm seeing the same thing in the American election, right? It's a society designed to reward stupidity. It's really remarkable how you can have a society with millions of people in it, and have the entire thing designed to reward the least intelligent members of society. I'll do a rant about this one day, because I had this argument with a friend of mine years ago. Well, maybe we'll talk about this. I mean, it looks like this is frozen. I don't really listen. I have anything else to do this morning, so I had this discussion with a friend of mine years ago. He made the argument that intelligence is determined by your ability to adjust to things in society. So it would follow that whoever does well in society is by definition intelligent, and whoever doesn't do well is by definition stupid. An intriguing concept of intelligence, to say the least. One that a lot of people that have been considered intelligent by people that have been successful would reject outright. In fact, it's almost the historical definition of foolishness. But I mean, this is the world we live in. Everything is backwards, right? But that's not really quite the correct response. I'm willing to play with that a little bit. Under a slight caveat. If you live in a society where you have to pretend to be stupid to get ahead, then if you live in a society where smart people have to pretend to be stupid to get ahead, then that might be a smart, like, there's some intelligence in recognizing that the society is designed around stupidity, and sort of faking it in order to get ahead, kind of thing. And there's actually lots of examples of that. If you take a look at actresses, at musicians. One example of that, and this isn't a total example, but I've been listening to some David Bowie as I've been doing this. It's in my list, and an example of that kind of mindset would be if you look at his record "Let's Dance." He himself, I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. He has acknowledged himself that he watered that down to sell copies, and it worked. I'm not sure if it's exactly his most successful record, but it was certainly one of them. And he made a lot of money on that by feigning idiocy. And certainly, I mean, it's one way to get ahead. And if you set up your goals in a specific way, there are ways that feigning stupidity can be reflective of intelligence. But my argument was that that's an argument that would apply to me. But it's an argument that wouldn't apply to my friend. Because I could demonstrate that I was smart enough. But he was just, hopping on the conveyor belt and being pushed along. And so ironically, for me, it would demonstrate intelligence if I was to, do that. For him, it would demonstrate a lack of intelligence, because he would be getting ahead not by feigning stupidity, but by actually legitimately fitting the profile of the individual that the society is designed around. This is Frozen. I don't want to upgrade right now, so I'm just going to put that link aside and deal with that sometime in the future. This is massively annoying. I wanted this done by today. The sun will be up in a few hours. I'll need to make decisions about whether I'm going anywhere tonight or not. Well, it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and what do I think? Do I think that's navigable? In fact, I do. And I'll tell you why. It's because it's cold. This is the same as the other day. It's below zero, so it won't be too bad. That said, I'm taking a bit of a risk and heading out tonight. The show is in Ferndale, which means that if I catch the bus back, I'll be fine, but if I don't, I'll be stuck there overnight. And I'm looking at some significant wind chill values in the minus 15 neighborhood overnight. Um, I will not be in the situation that I was in at the Skinny Puppy show. If I do end up overnight, there is a coffee shop and it is open all night, and I can stay there. So um, that's a positive. On top of that, I won't be in the situation I was in at the Trumbleplex show either, because I will be taking my jacket. It is clearly that time of year where one needs a jacket still. Although, I must point out that the long-term forecast starting on, I believe it's Saturday, is indicating that spring has nearly sprung. It's it's Canada and it's March, so you shouldn't get too excited, but um, it does look like the switch over is nearly upon us, which is good because I got a few shows coming up in the middle of March that are definite, zero question overnighters, and it would be nice for the temperature to be in that 10 plus degree range. That's what you really want in those circumstances. So I'm planning on it. There's a possibility I may pass out. So what I need to be doing right now is finishing up a little bit more of what I'm doing. I want to get. I've got up to the end of October 2015 so far, which is. We should get the mirror here. I've got up to the end of October 2015 so far, which is right before the systems shifted over. So if I can get up until around mid-August or so, I'll feel I've done something. Again, there's these like long threads that I'm pulling out huge amounts on. Some of them are taking a long time to find. Others are just long, right? So I mean, if I can hopefully eventually get to a point where I'm kind of moving a little bit more quickly, that'll be good. But it's a slow process. It's a little bit slower than I thought it would be, but this is how long it's taking, right? So if I can get to that point, then get something to eat, get ready, get everything kind of in motion, and maybe pass out for an hour or two. The show is early. That's the only reason I'm going, is because the show was billed as an early show. Doors are at 8. There's only 2 bands, and it's not like this isn't like a late night party show. This is like a toned down kind of like indie chick kind of thing. So I don't think it'll be late, because I don't think people are going to want to stay late. Yeah. On top of that, I think I might be a little bit more excited about presenting myself a little bit nicer as well at this show. So, but I've got to work everything out, make sure everything makes sense. This is at the same bar I was at in Ferndale before, where I was able to get home in time, and it's more likely that I'll get home on time for this show than it was for the other one. So, I'm planning for it, and I'm planning to get home on time. That said, if I go, then this is going to be a 2-day vlog, and I'll have to come back and do some editing when I get back. So, everything is kind of, I've got to shape it and get it going, kind of thing. But I think I'm planning on going. We'll find it. So Michigan, what do the early polls suggest? Well, early, they're not so early. The Michigan primary is pretty soon. So Sanders leads Clinton 58-39 with 18 to 39-year-olds. Okay, that's a good start. That's if he can hold that margin, then he can win some delegates and he can start catching up. That's about what he's got to win these sorts of states by, is about 60 to 40. All right. But Clinton leads Sanders 52 to 48% with 40 to 49-year-olds, 62 to 33% with 50 to 59-year-olds, 65 to 29% with 60 to 69-year-olds, and 82 to 16 with voters that are 70 or older. You can see there's a clear trend there that as the voter gets older, they support Clinton more and more and more. Now, I gotta point out that this may be a little too clear, um, but I don't like IVR polls. I think we've learned over the last little while that IVR polls can be wildly inconsistent. Sometimes they're right on, but sometimes they're not even close. The only way to really get a good polling is to have live interviewers, and the primary in Michigan is probably not important enough for anybody to put that in the ground. So we'll find out how close the polls are, but IVR polls can be completely wrong. They're one of the few. It's the internet polling is pretty consistently bad. The IVR polling is just all over the place. Sometimes it's spot on. Sometimes it's like not even close, right? So it's just flip a coin kind of thing. But regardless, I mean, like even if you cut it down, 10%, those are still numbers that are very hard to spin. Once you get the over, 50%. Sorry, once you get the over older than 50 demographic, he's still getting walloped even if you take it down 10%. How about race? Now, I don't like race polling, but Clinton is definitely ahead with white voters. With white voters, she's ahead 61 to 35. She is supposedly ahead with black voters 84 to 13. I'm probably dealing with relatively small sample sizes in limited geographic areas. But regardless, Michigan is the state where Bernie needs to break that trend and close that gap, okay? Black voters in Michigan ought to be a lot more liberal, and if he can't close that gap, at least to the point where it's statistically immeasurable, then he has to deal with the reality that there's a racial component to the race. What I mean when I say that is that if Clinton wins 61 to 35 with white voters, then whatever she wins white voters by, whatever she wins black voters by needs to be closer, right? So if she wins white voters 61 to 35 and she wins black voters, 65 to 35, then, it's not as glaring, right? So whatever she wins white voters by, the difference between what she wins white and black by really needs to be, in the 5 to 10 degree margin, not these consistent 20 plus differences. Even counting the fact that there's a lot less black people in Michigan, they're not going to be as overly religious. But I mean, the thing is that those numbers, so those statistics should help Sanders. So why aren't they, right? And if they're not, then you gotta face the facts here. And I'm sorry, but it's hard to understand without bringing in the anti-Semitism or simply questioning the fairness of the polling. It simply doesn't make sense. It simply doesn't, okay? Now, let's be clear, though. African American voters will not turn the results in Michigan. There's just not enough black people in Michigan. The pivotal part is going to be swinging older people. But whatever the black numbers are, they just need to get closer to the white numbers in terms of percentages. It's just a proof of concept. Okay, he has to demonstrate that blacks aren't voting as a bloc somehow. That issues and individual preferences are more important than racial identity politics or whatever it is that people are throwing around. Because if he can't do that, then you need to look at those numbers and try to figure out what the hell's going on. Again, it doesn't make sense. Urban black. See, I think that's another difference. I'm not sure about this. Again, I might be demonstrating my ignorance of American demographics, but I think that in Michigan is going to be a place where there's going to be more urban blacks, right? So black people are going to be I'm trying to watch my language here. I don't want to say that black people are going to be segregated into the cities. That's the kind of thing that when I was at the bar last night, we were talking about marijuana rights, and the fact that, or marijuana laws, and the fact that the reason why Colorado can have a law like that is because the legal system is designed in such a way that the states have more of a say. And I uttered the phrase states' rights. I caught myself immediately, but at the same time, it's like I gotta be real careful about certain language, right? I'm a Canadian. I mean no harm. It's just, and I know when I catch myself, it's just like phrases like that aren't loaded like that up here, right? So when we talk about the idea of a state having more rights, and we say states' rights casually, we really just mean it like that. We don't mean, in the context of the Civil War and Confederacy and all these sorts of things, right? We just mean to say that the American legal framework, the states' rights overpower the federal rights. That's the way the system is designed. And because of that, Colorado can pass a law legalizing marijuana without breaking the federal system's setup, which why is it so cold in here? I'm trying to heat up. Without breaking the federal system's international legal obligations. What I'm trying to say is that I think that black people are distributed mostly in cities in Detroit. I might be wrong, but my understanding is that it's more of an urban thing, and that the rural areas are going to be predominantly white. So if that's the case, then you should see urban politics assert itself. But like I say, what we saw in Massachusetts seems to break the logic there. It should be that people in the city should be, they should be more open to to redistributive concepts. However weak it is that Sanders' concept of redistribution really is. They should be more liberal, and in this kind of colloquial sense of the term liberal, and they should be more likely to take into what he's saying. So, given that truth, Sanders should do way better with blacks in Michigan than in the southern areas where there's a lot of rural blacks. Blacks on a lot of farms, and you get the same kind of left-right, urban-rural split. This can't be completely gone in the United States, because you see it in the Republican results. And if this continues to not make any sense, then like I say, you need to try to find extraneous circumstances like anti-Semitism, or you need to question whether the polling is fair. And I think that it's become strange enough, often enough, that those questions are becoming relevant beyond conspiratorial logic, and just simply these results don't make sense. If it was Russia and you had results that don't make sense, you would say, are these fair? But it seems to be outside of the discourse in the United States. It should be. It should be in the discourse. There should be more skepticism about the fairness of these results. And like I say, the Republican results are following proper urban-rural split trends the way you would expect them to. It's why is it not? There's something very strange happening in this Democratic primary. It's really hard to understand, and just simply does not make any sense in class analysis. But like I say, we'll see what the numbers look like in Michigan when they come up.